The Martium Mechanicum and the Adeptus Mechanicus that succeeded it have been known to create some rather crazy technology over the millennia. From the Collegia Titanica to the Legiones Cybernetica, their creations for war have become revered by some and reviled by others, depending on which side you're on. But that said, there is one sub-organisation within the Adeptus Mechanicus responsible for weapons that are even more terrifying. This organisation makes unique, titanic weapons of war, so large and powerful that they aren't even really war machines like the Collegia Titanica. No two are truly alike, and each is capable of wreaking untold devastation every time that they're fired. They are known as Ordinatus weapons, manufactured by the Adeptus Mechanicus under the watch of the Centurio Ordinatus. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The Centurio Ordinatus has been an organisation within the Mechanicum and later the Mechanicus for as long as anyone can remember. Certainly there are no known records about the creation of this sect within the Martian priesthood, but I don't know whether they'll have been there right from the start. I say this because the Centurio has only ever had one job to our knowledge, the creation and oversight of the Ordinatus weapons. Now, there is an Ordinatus weapon that was on Mars back in those days, so it may be that the weapon predates the Mechanicum and the Centurio became its guardians, but I can't say that with any certainty. But what exactly is an Ordinatus weapon anyway? Well, in concept, they're actually one of Mars's simplest creations, though the practicalities of making them and operating them are a whole other matter. In essence, an Ordinatus weapon is usually a gargantuan gun mounted on a slow-moving, multi-tracked platform and protected by powerful dispersion shields. Nothing more, nothing less. However, when I say gargantuan, I mean it. Just to give an example, the smallest Ordinatus uses the volcano cannon usually mounted on the arm of a warlord battle titan, and the largest, well, we'll get to some of them. Even the smallest of Ordinatii are capable of levelling titans or wiping out entire enemy armies depending on their weapon of choice, and the rediscovery of one almost inevitably ends in war as the Mechanicus and others race to secure it. Each and every Ordinatus is a technological marvel that is rightly revered and feared in equal measure. Only certain Forge Worlds are given the authority and resources to begin construction of one, and usually only the smaller variants known as Ordinatus Minoris. The larger weapons, the Ordinatus Primaris, are actually not built on a Forge World all that often. Instead, it is common for them to be constructed on the planet they will eventually be used on, designed for a specific purpose in a particular war rather than covering a range of possibilities. This is why the different Ordinatii are named after planets, such as the aforementioned Ordinatus Mars or the Ordinatus Golgotha, built solely to try and wipe out War Gazkul. Admittedly, that's not to say the naming convention is perfect. Some Ordinatii were known to be used or destroyed on worlds other than their name suggests, and those I assume were built on their namesake world, then moved after the fact if it was felt they could be used again. This designed to the situation ethos of the Centurio Ordinatus, who I assume have members spread across Forge Worlds and expeditionary fleets in case of need, is actually nearly unique amongst the dogmatic Mechanicus. There's a reason that the standard template constructs, or STCs, are so valuable to the Imperium. If a design or a modification deviates from the STC, it's almost techno-heresy in the eyes of many and would lead to immediate censure. Well, sometimes anyway, maybe not if your name's Belisarius Core. However, it appears that the Centurio is given much greater freedom to create what they deem as necessary for a given war, since I doubt there was a bank of Ordinatus STCs committed to memory all the way back in the Great Crusade. After all, if there were STCs for these weapons, then they would have been replicated and used on more worlds than just their namesake. Even the Ordinatus Minoris, which can be somewhat duplicated, are unique to the Forge world that created them as far as we know. During the Great Crusade, it is unknown just how many Ordinatus weapons were created and unleashed on the enemies of the Mechanicum and the Imperium, but certainly it was far more than we've met or heard of in the modern era. When the Horus Heresy rolled around, however, you can probably guess exactly what happened. The Schism of Mars ripped the Mechanicum in two, with the Dark Mechanicum and the renamed Adeptus Mechanicus unleashing hell upon each other. This, combined with the potential power and utility of the Ordinatii to both loyalist and traitor, meant that many of the weapons were a source of heavy fighting, and many were used along the way to devastating effect. I suspect that some of these actually went wrong in some way or another, due to hurrying or corrupting the machine spirits into being used to fire the weapon and leading to some kind of backlash. It's believed that the leader of the Centurio Ordinatus personally blessed every weapon before it was deployed, something I doubt due to the sort of on-the-fly construction and the sheer logistics of travelling the galaxy, but it is well known that machine spirits of the largest weapons or engines are notoriously temperamental. That said, they were still dangerous even if their spirits misbehaved, and I don't doubt that untold devastation was wrought across many worlds, including Mars itself, by the Ordinatii. Following the heresy, however, many of the Ordinatus weapons were lost or forgotten, much like a lot of Mechanicum technology if we're being truthful. Quite often they would be left or buried in underground facilities, far away from the prying eyes of the galaxy. As mentioned, their rediscovery will spark a war, but unlike many creations of that period, there are still Ordinatus weapons being built today. For example, Ordinatus Golgotha. Now, we've done our best to cover what little we know of the Ordinatus weapons, so let's look at a few of the most famous, or at least the most documented ones. In fact, we have two Ordinatii associated with the same world, though not with each other or even the same war. The first is Ordinatus Ullanor. The name alone should tell you exactly how old it is. This weapon was constructed not for the conquest of Ullanor in the Great Crusade, but rather for the Imperium's return to the planet in the War of the Beast. I believe that it was part of the first attempt to take back Ullanor from the forces of the Beast, the one that involved Vulcan. It wasn't actually brought to Ullanor for the invasion, but built very quickly during the utterly botched war by Magus Dominus Gerg Zukuv. This ancient and inhuman Magos was one of the Mechanicus' brightest minds at the time, as well as a strong battlefield general, and when confronted with the sheer power of the Beast's armies, he improvised. Utterly disregarding all the rules of the cult Mechanicus, Zukuv effectively committed techno-heresy, constructing Ordinatus Ullanor. The armament of the Ordinatus was a plasma accelerator, which Zukuv salvaged from a Mechanicus battleship that had been down during the space battles, whilst the chassis was essentially the hull of a Titan-sized Capitol Imperialis super heavy tank. Quite how this was done is unknown, but Ordinatus Ullanor did work despite its improvised nature. Sadly for the Imperium, however, it did not last long, and Orc Gargant, one of the largest seen in history, destroyed it before the Imperial invasion was repulsed. Nearly 10,000 years later, Ullanor was now known as Armageddon, and a second, unrelated Ordinatus would be built on its surface for use in another apocalyptic conflict. Ordinatus Armageddon, also designated or known as Oberon, was much more planned and prepared than its ancestor, being constructed as part of the first war for Armageddon against the forces of Chaos under the demon Primarch Angron. The weapon used this time was also taken from a starship, though from the Imperial Navy this time rather than the Mechanicus. Ordinatus Armageddon used one of the plasma-based riser pattern Nova cannons, a weapon so power-intensive that it causes power failures on an Astartes battle barge every time it's fired, and I know this because the Imperium tried it a grand total of once. Usually reserved for Navy cruisers and battleships, the Nova Cannon essentially fires a not-so-miniature star, with some estimates placing the warhead size alone at a diameter of around 50 meters. So if you didn't already know just how powerful an Ordinatus can be, well, now hopefully you do. Whilst we don't know the amount of conflict seen by Ordinatus Armageddon during Angron's invasion, we do know that it was actually wheeled out a second time a few centuries later during the Third Armageddon War. The Black Templars at the Hell's Reach Crusade under Reclusiarch Grimaldus discovered Oberon, dormant and almost powerless, but still just about able to go. Whilst the Templars busied themselves with the defence of the Hive, their tech marine remained with the Ordinatus, desperately trying to get it back online. Even when they did, the Titan Legio Invigilata were loath to let it see combat, knowing that it was vulnerable without its Guitarii Guardians or the typical dispersion shield defences. In the end, Ordinatus Armageddon fired a grand total of once in the entire war, but it was a vital shot indeed in the battle for Hell's Reach. Rampaging through the Hive at the time was another massive Orc Gargant known as Godbreaker, a machine so powerful as to destroy Invigilator's Imperator-class Titan Storm Herald. But the death of the Imperator gave Oberon and its lone pilot one shot, destroying Godbreaker in a single hit with a Nova Cannon before the remainder of Invigilator escorted it to safety. Without Ordinatus Armageddon, it is thought that Godbreaker and the Orcs would have annihilated the defenders of Hell's Reach. It may not have been designed for fighting Orcs, but getting a measure of payback for the ancestor it didn't know it had is a pleasing idea to me. Finally, I want to discuss one of the Ordinatus Minoris and one of perhaps the most unique Ordinatus out there, Ordinatus Actaeus. Exactly where or what Actaeus is has been lost to time. I'd assume it's a Forge World, but there's no records on it that I can find. The Ordinatus that bears its name is pretty much the only Ordinatus that isn't a massive gun. Instead, it's a super heavy, scaled up version of the underground attack weapons known as the Mole and the Termite. It resembles a giant drill used to transport the armies of the Mechanicum under the battlefield in relative safety. It also caused rather major earthquakes and other seismic phenomena due to its sheer size and power, further throwing enemy forces into disarray before the Actaeus emerged to unload its troops. There was actually an Ordinatus Primaris believed to work as an underground transport too, Ordinatus Priam, built in the Horus Heresy during a siege of the world of the same name. This one was said to dig through the entire crust in order to travel through the lava in Priam's mantle. It did succeed in this endeavour, dropping off several companies of Imperial Army troops, but it was left damaged beyond repair due to a partial shielding failure. I wonder whether any of the Actaeus designers were involved in the creation of Ordinatus Priam, though I find it unlikely because it would be an incredible coincidence and we haven't got an idea on timings. Hang you, I wouldn't be surprised if they at least took a little bit of inspiration from the idea. And there you have it, a look at the Centurio Ordinatus and the weapons they create and unleash. Whilst they are rarer than a Titan and potentially even more devastating, the Ordinatus weapons do not have the same place in Imperial folklore as the god machines, despite their sacred status amongst the Mechanicus. These unique and unholy powerful machines were always utterly devastating, as I hope I've been able to demonstrate throughout this log. And if you ever see one and you're not allied to it, well, let's just say you're in trouble. For now, however, we must move on. Our next log will actually scale things up even further from the Ordinatii, looking at some of the largest vessels plying the stars today. Granted, calling them ships is a little awkward due to their nature, but they're very interesting in their own way, and we'll see exactly why soon. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.